Want the next story set in your city? Comment below where you're watching from. I really listen. And who knows, your city might be featured in the next video. I landed in Portland on a rainy Friday afternoon, my heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the noise of the airport. 5 years, 1,826 days of waiting, all converging on this single moment. In the cab on the way to the hotel, I watched the city blur past the fogged-up window. Portland was different from New York, greener, calmer, with a rhythm that seemed to breathe rather than gasp. I wondered if Michael, I corrected myself mentally, had chosen this place for that very reason. An antidote to the frantic intensity of the life he'd left behind. At the hotel, I took a quick shower, more to calm my nerves than out of necessity. I stood in front of the closet for 15 whole minutes, staring at the clothes I'd brought. Nothing felt right. I finally chose a simple gray sweater and dark jeans. Nothing extravagant. I wanted him to see me as I really was now. Not the idealized girl from his memories, but the woman I'd become through the waiting, the pain, the growth. At 1:30 p.m., I took an Uber to the address. My driver, a friendly man in his 60s, tried to make small talk about the best places to visit in Portland, but my answers were distracted monosyllables. He eventually gave up, leaving me to my racing thoughts. I arrived at 1:45 p.m., 15 minutes early. I stood on the sidewalk across from the grind, watching the fine mist that had started to fall, creating halos around the streetlights even in the middle of the afternoon. The coffee shop looked cozy, large windows, now steamy from the humidity, and a rustic wooden sign swinging slightly in the wind. I took 3 deep breaths, then 3 more. My fingers clutched the strap of my purse so tightly my knuckles were white. You waited 5 years for this, I told myself. You can't back out now. I pushed open the door. A delicate bell announced my entrance. The inside was even more charming than it promised from the outside. Worn wooden tables, mismatched chairs, shelves lined with used books that customers could borrow freely. The rich aroma of freshly ground coffee enveloped everything. There were only a few patrons, an elderly couple reading a newspaper by the window, a young woman with headphones typing furiously on a laptop, and then I saw him. He was sitting at a table in the corner, his back to the wall, always strategic, always cautious. Some habits never completely die. But the moment our eyes met, all that military posture melted away. He stood up so fast he almost knocked over his chair. He looked different. His hair, once always combed back with disciplined precision, was now in a more relaxed cut, with strands falling naturally over his forehead. A well-groomed beard covered the jawline that had once been perfectly clean-shaven. He was wearing a worn leather jacket over a simple cotton t-shirt, none of the impeccable tailored suits, dark jeans, boots, but the eyes. Those dark gray eyes were exactly the same. They still held that intensity, that depth that had captured me from the very first moment. Elena. My name came out as a hoarse whisper, loaded with 5 years of longing compressed into 2 syllables. My legs moved on their own. I crossed the cafe without feeling the floor beneath my feet, and when we were just inches apart, when I could feel the warmth radiating from him, all my carefully constructed composure crumbled. He pulled me into his arms with an almost desperate urgency. His arms wrapped around me as if I were something precious he feared losing again. He buried his face in my hair, and I felt his entire body tremble. He was crying. Damian Caruso, Michael Hayes, the man who had faced the mob, the FBI, the total loss of his identity, was shaking in my arms, sobbing silently against my neck. And I was crying too. Hot tears that soaked the leather of his jacket. Years of pain and hope and impossible love finally finding release. You came, he murmured into my hair, his voice broken. God, you really came. I thought. I was so scared you'd change your mind, that you'd realize it wasn't worth it. Damian? I pulled back just enough to hold his face in my hands. He was thinner, I realized. New lines marked the corners of his eyes, but it was him. My Damian, even under a different name. I waited 5 years, whole years. I wasn't going to give up now. Michael, he corrected gently, covering my hands with his. I'm Michael now, Damian Caruso. He died in that office 5 years ago, but this man here, He pressed my hand against his chest where I could feel his heart hammering. This man is all yours, if you'll still have him. I'll have him, I answered without hesitation. I don't care what name you use. I want you. He kissed me then. It wasn't like our first kiss on the High Line. That one had been discovery, promise, a beginning. This was recognition, reaffirmation, a new beginning. His hands framed my face with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity of the kiss. I clung to him, fingers tangling in his hair, memorizing every detail, the way he tilted his head, the taste of coffee on his lips, the low sound he made in the back of his throat. When we broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. The barista behind the counter politely looked away, feigning a sudden fascination with the espresso machine. Sorry, Michael, and I had to start thinking of him that way, muttered, a nervous laugh escaping him. That's probably not appropriate for the middle of a coffee shop. I don't care, I said honestly. We've waited too long to worry about being proper. He smiled, that devastating smile that transformed his entire face, making his eyes shine. Want to sit? I ordered coffee for you. I remembered how you like it, with milk, no sugar. You remembered. I remember everything, Elena. Every conversation, every look, every moment. He led me to the table, pulling out the chair for me, with that old-fashioned courtesy some people call antiquated, but which had always made me feel cherished. We sat across from each other, our hands immediately finding each other's on the table, fingers lacing together, as if letting go meant losing each other all over again. You look beautiful, he said, his eyes tracing my face with an intensity that made me blush. More beautiful than in my memories. And I replayed those memories every single day. You too, different, but... I ran my thumb over the scruff on his chin. This is new. Part of the initial new identity, but I found I like it. Less maintenance than being clean-shaven all the time. A wry smile. I found I like a lot of things about this life. Things I was never allowed to like before. Like what? He thought for a moment. Waking up without looking over my shoulder, going grocery shopping without a security detail, having conversations where I don't have to weigh every word, calculating who might be listening. His expression softened. Being able to plant a real future, not just survival strategies, but genuine dreams. And those dreams, my voice trembled slightly, do they include someone? He squeezed my hands. They always included you, Bella. Even when I tried to convince myself it was impossible, that I had to move on. My dreams always came back to you. We talked for hours. The cafe around us emptied and refilled with the late afternoon crowd. New cups appeared on our table, replacing the ones that grew cold, forgotten as we spoke. He told me about the transition, the terrifying first months when every strange noise made him freeze, when every unfamiliar face seemed like a threat. The mandatory therapy from the protection program that, after initial resistance, ended up being his salvation. How he had finally started to process decades of trauma, guilt, and impossible choices. For the first time in my life, I had to really look at myself, he confessed. Not the role I was playing, not the expectations I carried, but who I actually was when everything else was stripped away. And you know what I found? What? That I liked him, the man under all the layers. He's quiet. He likes to read. He loves strong espresso and morning hikes. He's kind when he doesn't have to be tough. And he is deeply, irrevocably in love with an art curator from Brooklyn who saw his soul when everyone else just saw power. Tears blurred my vision again. I discovered things about myself too, that I'm stronger than I thought, that I can survive loss and still choose to love again, and that a part of my heart will always belong to you, no matter how much time passes. And the other part? He asked softly. The other part is waiting to see if we can build something real, not based on memories or nostalgia, but on who we are now. You're Michael Hayes, I'm Elena Morrison, and we need to find out if those two people work as well as Damien and Elena did. He nodded slowly, and I saw respect in his eyes. Fair, more than fair. Then he pulled something from his jacket pocket, a key with a simple chain. I rented an apartment, 2 bedrooms, because I didn't want to presume, but I also didn't want you to think I wasn't hopeful. My heart sped up. It's 20 minutes from here. It's modest compared to what you're used to with me, but it gets a lot of natural light, a view of the trees, and... He hesitated. There's a boutique art gallery on the ground floor of the building, small but with a good reputation. They're looking for someone to take over as curator. I stared at him, processing. You're asking me to stay? To move to Portland? I'm asking you to consider it. It doesn't have to be permanent at first. You could go back and forth, test the waters, see if this life, if I, still makes sense in the real world, not just in letters and memories. He spun the key on the table. But if it does, if you decide you want to try, then what? He looked at me with a vulnerability so raw it took my breath away. Then we build something new, together, no lies, no secrets, no shadows from the past chasing us, just me, you, and the life I always wanted, but never knew I could have until I lost you. I picked up the key. It felt light in my hand, but it carried the weight of an enormous choice. I could go back to New York, keep my carefully rebuilt life, turn this reunion into a proper goodbye, a closure we never had. Or I could jump. Again, trust that this time, without the danger and the secrets, we could finally have our chance. I looked at the man in front of me, no longer Damien Caruso, the mob boss shrouded in power and peril, but Michael Hayes, a man trying to be better, trying to be free, trying to build a life worth living. And I realized, I hadn't fallen in love with the wealth or the danger. I had fallen in love with the man who understood loneliness, who looked at art and saw souls, who looked at me as if I were the only real thing in a world of illusions. That man was still here, just with a different name and a chance to start over. I want to try, I heard myself say, but slowly, one step at a time. No impossible expectations, no pressure. Let's just see where this goes. The smile that lit up his face was one of pure, incandescent relief and joy. Slow I can do. I've learned patience over the last 5 years. I can wait as long as you need. He stood up, rounded the table, and pulled me into a hug that seemed to embrace not just my body, but my entire soul. I stood there, in his arms, listening to his heart beat steady against my ear, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 5 years, complete hope. Not tainted by fear or doubt, but pure and crystalline. Want to see the apartment? He murmured into my hair. Yes, I want to see where you live. I want to get to know your life. We left the coffee shop holding hands. The rain had stopped, leaving the wet streets to reflect the city lights like a shattered mirror. We walked slowly, unhurried, as if we wanted to stretch this moment into eternity. This was our second first chance, and this time, we were going to get it right. 5 years later. Mommy! The high-pitched little voice echoed through the house, followed by the unmistakable sound of bare feet pattering down the hardwood hallway. I barely had time to set my coffee mug on the table before a small storm of dark brown hair and gray eyes launched itself into my arms. Good morning, my love, I laughed, kissing the top of Sophia's head. You're up early today. Theo's crying again, she announced with the dramatic seriousness only a 4-year-old can muster. He's too loud. From the bedroom down the hall, whimpers confirmed her report. I sighed with that happy exhaustion of a mother who sleeps in 3-hour intervals but wouldn't trade it for anything. I'll get him. Michael appeared at the bedroom door, barefoot, wearing a faded t-shirt and pajama pants, his hair a complete mess from sleep. He had just turned 40, and a few silver strands now dotted his temples, but to me he had never looked more handsome. Morning, princess. He leaned down to kiss Sophia. Morning, love. Another kiss, this one longer for me. Morning, coffee's ready. You're a goddess. He disappeared down the hall, and seconds later, Theo's cries turned into happy gurgles. I stood up, scooping Sophia into my arms and walking to the large living room window. Our house, a 2-story home in the Portland suburbs, surrounded by trees and with a garden where Sophia loved to chase butterflies, was so different from the world Michael had been born into that it sometimes still felt surreal, but it was real. 10 years of a life built brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. Is Grandma Sarah coming today? Sophia asked, fiddling with the necklace I wore, a simple piece Michael had given me on the 2nd anniversary of our new beginning. She is. She's coming for lunch. Sarah visited at least once a month, always bringing news from the gallery in New York, which was thriving under her shared management with a new partner, and gifts that were far too extravagant for the kids. She had become a real aunt, a living witness to the impossible journey that had brought me here. Michael returned with Theo in his arms, the baby clinging to his father's shoulder, drooling happily on his shirt. With his dark curly hair and eyes identical to his dad's, Theo was a miniature copy of Michael, which always made everyone smile. "Someone's hungry," Michael announced, handing the baby to me while he started preparing a bottle with the efficiency of someone who had done it 1,000 times. Sophia ran to grab her colored pencils from the coffee table, where a dozen colorful drawings were already spread out. The house was a chaotic and perfect mix of toys, children's books, drawings hung proudly. On the walls, a rule Michael had instituted, saying creativity should always be encouraged, and the wonderful normality of an ordinary family. As I fed Theo, I watched Michael in the kitchen. He moved with that economic grace he'd never lost, even while doing mundane tasks like making breakfast. He wore reading glasses now, a concession to age that he made a point of mocking, and there was a smear of banana puree on last night's shirt that he clearly hadn't noticed. It was so perfectly imperfect, so wonderfully real. "Remember when you told me you couldn't offer me anything but an ordinary life?" I asked softly. Michael stopped stirring his coffee, turning to me with that attentive expression that meant I had his full attention. "I remember at the coffee shop that first day. You were right, it is ordinary. It's absolutely perfectly ordinary." I smiled, feeling happy tears welling up. "And it's the best thing that's ever happened to me." He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, leaning down to kiss my forehead, while Theo nursed peacefully. "I'm glad you stayed. I'm glad you let me." The transition hadn't been without its challenges. The first few months were a series of comings and goings, me keeping the gallery in New York while I tested the waters in Portland, staying for weeks at a time, then going back. Each visit made it harder to leave. Each airport goodbye was more painful than the last. I remember the night, 6 months after our reunion, when I finally made the decision. We were in his apartment, our apartment, as I'd already started to think of it. After a simple dinner we'd cooked together. He was washing the dishes, humming softly to a song on the radio, completely absorbed in the task, and I just knew. "I want to stay," I'd said, without any preamble. He froze, hands still submerged in Sarant's soapy water, and turned to me slowly. "Stay as in this weekend? Or stay as in stay, for real, forever? I want to sell my share of the gallery to Sarah. I want to take the curator job here. I want to build a life with you, not just visit it in intervals." He dried his hands quickly, approaching me with a mixture of hope and fear on his face. "Elena, are you sure? Because if there's 1% of doubt, if you think you might regret it." "The only thing I'll regret is not doing this sooner. I love you, Michael. I love this life we're building, and I want all of it, fully, permanently." He had kissed me then, a kiss salty with tears. His or mine, we never knew, and whispered against my lips, "Marry me." It wasn't a question. It was a plea, a promise, a certainty. "Yes," I had answered without hesitating. 1,000 times yes. We were married 3 months later, in a small ceremony in our garden. Sarah was my maid of honor, giving a hilarious speech about how she always knew I'd end up with a mysterious and impossible man. Marco, who kept in sporadic, cautious contact with Michael, always checking to see if he was okay, even came, standing discreetly in the back, but his smile when he saw us exchange vows was genuine. The boutique gallery had flourished under my curatorship. I turned it from an unknown space into one of the landmarks of contemporary art in the Northwest. The work was fulfilling, the hours flexible enough to balance with family life, and for the first time, I felt whole, professionally accomplished and personally happy. Michael had flourished too. His financial consulting firm grew organically, built on genuine competence and an honest reputation. He was an active member of Sophia's preschool PTA, a volunteer in a mentorship program for small business owners, especially those from marginalized communities. When people asked about his past, he would simply say he'd worked in the family business in New York, but preferred a quieter life. It wasn't a lie, it just wasn't the whole truth. "Daddy, come draw with me," Sophia yelled from the living room, her patience for adult conversation exhausted. "I'm coming, princess. He picked up his coffee cup, throwing me a look that clearly said, "Look what you got me into. I love every second of it." "Can you take Theo too?" "Of course, we're having a family art morning." I watched the three of them, Michael sitting on the floor with Sophia, feigning absolute seriousness as she explained her abstract drawing of a butterfly unicorn princess. Theo on his lap, trying to eat a crayon. It was a scene so normal, so wonderfully mundane, that my heart overflowed. The past existed. It didn't just disappear because you changed your name or your city. Occasionally, Michael still woke from nightmares, drenched in a cold sweat, clinging to me as if to verify I was real. Sometimes, when we watched news reports about organized crime, I'd see his shoulders tense, his jaw tighten. But over time, I learned that Damien Caruso wasn't who Michael Hayes used to be. He was who circumstances had forced him to become. This man, the one playing on the floor with his daughter, the one who woke at 3 a.m. without complaint to rock his baby back to sleep, the one who kissed me every morning as if each day were a gift. This was who he had always wanted to be, and I had the privilege of witnessing that truth every day. Later, as we prepared lunch together, Michael chopping vegetables with the precision of someone who had learned Italian cooking from demanding nonnas, me seasoning the chicken, Sophia helping by handing us random utensils, Theo watching everything from his playpen, I felt that familiar wave of profound gratitude. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, noticing my faraway look. "About how I almost let fear win. At that coffee shop 10 years ago, I could have said no. I could have decided it was too risky, too complicated, that protecting my heart was more important than risking it. And I wouldn't have blamed you. I never would have. I know, and that's exactly why I said yes." I moved closer, kissing him lightly. "Because you never pressured me. You just offered me an honest choice. And that honesty was everything. It's what made me trust you." He pulled me into a hug, his chin resting on the top of my head. "Thank you for choosing to stay. For choosing this life. For choosing me even when I didn't think I deserved to be chosen. Always," I promised, echoing the words I'd said 10 years before. "In any life, under any circumstance, always you." "Ew, you guys are kissing again," Sophia complained, making Michael laugh. "Get used to it, kiddo," he said, scooping her up and lifting her into the air, drawing shrieks of laughter from her. "When you grow up, you'll understand that when you really love someone, you show them every day." "I'm gonna love butterflies then," Sophia declared with the absolute certainty of a child. "Excellent choice," I agreed, turning back to the stove. Sarah arrived at noon, bringing wine and a ridiculously large teddy bear for Theo. "Because every baby needs a friend his own size," she explained, laughing at my, "Where are we going to put this?" expression. During lunch, she updated us on New York, the gallery, mutual friends, the city's constant changes. But her eyes kept drifting back to us, to the family we had built, with an expression of genuine contentment. "You seem happy," she said simply when Michael stepped out to put the kids down for their afternoon nap. "I am deeply, impossibly, absurdly happy." "Well," she raised her wine glass, "you deserve it. After everything, you really do." That night, after Sarah had left and the children were asleep, Michael and I sat on the small back deck, sharing a bottle of wine under the starry Oregon sky. The night was clear, the stars brighter than we could ever see them in New York. 10 years since Portland," I murmured, my head on his shoulder. "Since that coffee shop, since everything started over." "Best decision I ever made," Michael answered, kissing my intertwined fingers. "Sending those flowers, taking a chance that you still cared. And what if I hadn't put up the ad? Then I would have lived the rest of my life knowing I tried, that I gave you, us, one last chance." He turned to face me. "But secretly, I always knew you would come. Because what we had, that doesn't just go away, no matter how much time passes." "No," I agreed. "It doesn't." We sat there in the comfortable silence of two people who don't need to fill every moment with words. Two people who found each other, lost each other, and against all odds, found each other again to build something that should have been impossible. I remembered that photograph in the gallery all those years ago, the woman alone on the subway, staring out the window. I used to identify with that loneliness. But now I understood. Sometimes you have to be lost to be found. Sometimes you have to fall apart completely to be rebuilt stronger, and sometimes, very rarely, you find someone who is willing to fall apart and rebuild right alongside you. I love you, I told Michael, turning to look him in the eyes. Not the man you were, not just the man you are, but the man you choose to be every single day. That constant choice to be better, to be present, to be real, that's what I love. And I love you, he replied, his hands framing my face. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For waiting when it would have been easier to move on. For building this impossible life with me, day after day, choice after choice. We kissed under the stars, surrounded by the peaceful silence of our garden, our home, our life. We didn't live happily ever after, because happiness isn't a constant state, it's a daily choice. We have bad days, we argue about dirty dishes and overdue bills. There are nights when we're too exhausted to even talk. Just falling into bed in silence. But even on the hard days, there is love. There is choice. There is presence. And that, we discovered, is more than enough. It's everything. Inside the house, Theo started to cry softly. Michael sighed dramatically. My turn. Our turn, I corrected, standing up with him. We walked inside hand in hand, ready for another sleepless night, another day of organized chaos. Another moment of this ordinary, extraordinary life. And somewhere, in a box stored in the back of a closet, a leather jacket and a yellowed letter rest side by side, silent witnesses to a love story that defied the impossible. A story that began with a glance across a crowded gallery. A story that survived separation, fear, and complete reinvention. A story that, against all odds, got its happy ending. Not because it was easy, but because it was real.